Hi, I'm going to read from the book Färjan, the ferry in English. We are now currently on the 7th episode. I was going to do some kind of an environmental description when it comes to my family. It's that Grandma and Grandpa rented an apartment, and Lina and Greta rented an apartment near Grandma and Grandpa. They were kind of like each other. The two younger sisters were treated a bit differently. Aunt Mona moved out to the country instead and gave birth to three children there. Uncle Uno ended up in a shelter quite early. I spent my first 4 hours years there in the apartments around Grandma and Grandpa. I remember it smelled special. Sometimes Grandpa would have a drink. It could be a sip of wine. I got a taste and I ran and spat it all out in the toilet. Anyone who has tasted a sip of Madeira knows how the wine that Grandpa poured out for me tasted as a child. It has a fairly high alcohol content, and the wine has a kind of sweet taste. Hard to describe in just a few words. I love Grandpa. He is probably one of the people who have been closest to me in my whole life. I remember how I held his hand when we walked somewhere or where we were on our way somewhere. I grew up for the most of my part of my first 4 years with Grandma and Grandpa. It wasn't meant for Mom Greta to be sick at times. It wasn't meant for her to be absent. And you can be absent even if you're there. It's hard. Next chapter. North side. Instead of going all the way to Piteå, we drive towards Piteå, but with our sights set on the ferry terminal at Sikfors in Piteå municipality. So we come from Älvsbyn municipality, but the ferry terminal is in Piteå municipality before you get to Arnemark. There are probably at least two sets of signs, and yet I have missed it at some point. Then you have to drive to Arnemark and then turn around and drive back. The sign shows Sikfors and the ferry terminal. I don't know why we decided to start going here. Maybe it was the excitement of taking a ferry in the middle of everything. It's not something that you do every day. It's a procedure. We didn't want to drive all the way to Piteå. There was a reason. Johannes is in such a hurry. Turn around, go back, says Johannes. Sometimes I drive through the double roundabouts where it smells of cow dung. The farmer or farmers must have spread dung somewhere around the roundabouts, or the wind is exactly the right or wrong way when you get there. But most of the time I drive out to the ferry pier and then the ferry is gone. It is either on its way to the south side, or it has anchored on the north-south side, or it is on its way back to the north side. There is often one or a few cars in line. Waiting time is not something that Johannes likes. I think that is a bit of the charm. It's during the waiting time that we get to know each other. This is a perfect place to talk for a while. And that's what we do. We get to know each other in our own very special way. Johannes can often squeeze in a question that I try to answer. When we started hanging out, Johannes asked me a lot about my illness and, for example, how many times I'd been in the hospital. He probably thought that it felt important at first. I've told him that I've been hospitalized a lot, maybe 50 times, and almost as many times I've suffered from mania and or depression. Johannes has only been in the hospital once, and that was when we got to know each other. I'm a real repeat offender compared to Johannes, big time. What doesn't a high-functioning person with Asperger's have to talk to with someone bipolar type 1? There are plenty. Johannes is in a situation where he may feel the need to talk to someone, preferably in the evening. I don't have that need in my life right now. I've been in therapy for at least 2 long periods, 7 years plus 7 years. But these days it feels like I've finished talking. I don't know why or how it happened, but maybe I've learned to have a dialogue within myself. I don't need anyone to ask questions or listen to, although it's nice sometimes. Suddenly we're pulled up on the ferry and are on our way, finally on our way. I can recognize the need to talk from my own life. It was the years after Oscar came to us. I was in therapy in PTO at the time. I was given access to leave messages on my therapist's answering machine, and I really was broadcasting on all wavelengths. I could record hours of conversations on that answering machine. I don't know how many of those conversations were just washed away. My therapist could never have had the time to listen to everything. There is not a chance in hell that she would have had all the time. I would have probably required at least one full-time employee to keep up with all the information that I was broadcasting during this period. In one of our best conversations, she tells me that I cannot call her answering machine and tell her that I'm thinking to kill myself. It would hurt her so much. It would hurt her too much, to hear me while she can't reach out and help. She thought that kind of information would be too hard, so I never brought up anything to do with suicide on her answering machine. I think I avoided anything to do with self-harm. I understood that it would be too hard for her. I took that seriously, and she's probably one of the people I've gotten closest to, my second therapist. I had this second therapist for 7 years. I had the first therapist who I also went to for 7 years. And of course, we got to know each other very well. There has been nothing sexual between me and my therapist. I have never had any such thoughts about my therapist. It may be a little strange, but that's how it is anyway. Nothing sexual ever entered these two relationships of mine. It was like I was on fire and the smoke was rising higher and higher. I didn't know what to do with all the smoke. I couldn't it couldn't be caught, and it couldn't be stopped. It was just an impossible situation. I could have been broadcasting on every frequency all the time. It never ended. There was so much that wanted out, that wanted away from me. Imagine if I had been there and listened to myself. Cool down a bit, I would have told myself. I know it would end. I know there was an end. No one can dig that deep. And so much, hour after hour of talking in the voicemail. I could have kept an entire newspaper going with information. I was hot and everything I touched got hot. As long as I didn't tell them I was going to kill myself, I would stay away from that. If I felt so intensely these years, it's hard to explain it in any other way. I felt so strongly. My first therapist worked with something called psychodynamic therapy. As I understand it, it's in line with Freud and the boys. You look for the answers within yourself. One of the most important things I learned from my first therapist was that I could taste different things. If I had a question, should I go left or right? Then I could imagine going left, and then I imagined going right. And then I felt what which felt best, and there was the answer. It was like I had really been there, and the answers were really good. It was like I could use myself as a compass. My second therapist worked more with cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, but sometimes I didn't really see the difference. Of course, I brought my experience from my first therapist with me into my new therapy, and there was nothing special about that. My second therapist and I really had to work on my illness and my medications. I had so little medication when I went to my first therapist. Over time, the mountain of pills grew, and sometimes it's hard to know what's what. Is it me or the medication that's talking? God, how many different medications I've tried over the years. What if I had been given a new pill? So you can rethink a lot. I thought I was talking to cousin Tom, and he said that if he only knew what he knew today, he would have made completely different decision when it comes to, for example, his tuning of his Mercedes. He would probably have chosen a different turbo. There is so much he didn't know when he started a few years ago. What type of turbo should you choose? What should the system around the turbo look like? Cooling and water pump, and radiator and fan, different pressures that should look different. One pressure should relate in a certain way to the other pressure, and so on. And now it doesn't look all the way it should. He has to dig deeper and deeper. There is an endless knowledge there, in the small and the big, and the more careful you look, the more there is to see. Cousin Tom is the first in my family to be interested in tuning engines. In this case, a turbocharged engine in a Mercedes-Benz 190D from 1993. He gets to go over every rivet you can think of. It's one thing with the other, with the third. If you look from one side when you were standing in a specific place, then you would have made a different decision than you do now when you experience the situation from the other side. But the second experience comes from the first experience, and you can't skip that certain step. Lithium and quetiapine and anafranil, these three form the basis of my medication, and then sleep medication and the issue of insomnia. I have tried Lyrica and Concerta, and they have of course affected me in a certain way. There are a whole bunch of medications that are supposed to be good for anxiety relievers. And sometimes it feels like you are just shoveling the problem around. We cut off a little anxiety here, and then anxiety appears somewhere else there. Maybe I have less anxiety these days. I don't have anything in particular I want to talk about. There is nothing in particular that needs to come out from me these days. I needed to talk, no more, no longer. Lithium is a classic stabilizer. It's good for both up and down periods. I don't know when lithium became popular, but it's a real classic for those with bipolar disorder. I have heard some bad things about lithium, but most of it has been good for me. It was like life started again when I got lithium. I had been so down for so long. I never thought it would end, but it turned around, and then I had at least 6 months where I felt really, really good. Quetiapine is both a neuroleptic and a stabilizer. It chases away the psychosis while providing stability. Anafranil is a classic antidepressant. It's probably here when we stopped to wait for the ferry or when we were riding the ferry that we have the chance to look at each other in the eye. We don't look each other in the eye that much. I sometimes look up at Johannes, who always sits on my right, and then I often think that he seems to have cut himself when he has shaved. He can have areas where it looks like there are dried blood. It's not terribly creepy, but it reminds me that you can hurt yourself with something as tiny as a razor. Johannes can also have some pimples. I almost don't have pimples at all. It's nice in its own way. It's nice. When we come from Älvsby municipality into Piteå municipality, we see the sign for Stigfors and the ferry on the right. This is where you turn off to the ferry terminal. You drive uphill and then down into a roundabout where you turn right. Here the landscape has opened up. It's a large clearing or open land. The forest lies in both directions, but here it's open. There are a few hundred meters out to the river bank. I think there has always been a vehicle ahead of us, a vehicle waiting for the ferry. Yes, except this winter when we just looked at the ice road and decided not to go across. New chapter, the friends. I have many great friends. Here where I live and in other parts of Sweden. What do these friends have in common? I don't really know. They are genuinely nice and kind people. We've seen something in each other, something we liked. Maybe you show a certain amount of respect. Respect is important. It's really important. Kindness, openness, honesty. These qualities are also terribly important. It's like it shrinks the number of possible friends significantly. Significantly. Maturity and independence, perhaps. You can list as many qualities you want. What can you think of? The most important quality that I think my friends have is that they see me in a way that I want to be seen. They see me in a way that I recognize myself. They like me. They want to do something good with me. They see something good in me. A funny thing is that my friends often like each other. It's like if it's true between me and two different people, it's true between these people too. It's kind of cool. It might not be that weird. When I think of my friends, I think of the fact that I got to know my friends at different times during my life. I first became friends with a whole bunch when I was growing up. These friends were there from the time I was in elementary school. Since then, we have followed each other. We have kept in touch through high school and through college. These friends are still there. We usually see each other during the summer when everyone is home on vacation. In this group, I have a so-called fixed star, namely Mats Ludde Lundberg, who I keep in touch with. You could probably say that he is my absolutely first best friend in life. What has happened is that Mats has moved down to Stockholm and got a job there. He met his current wife Sonja down in Stockholm and he has two children with her, two fantastically beautiful children. But we call and text each other, we keep in touch. I also usually get in touch with my friend Matthias who has moved down to Nyköping. We always have a lot of fun to talk about. It's strange. We don't have to hear from each other for 6 months, and then we call each other and everything is suddenly back to normal. As if we have heard it from each other yesterday. It's a special friendship, the kind of friendship that was so early. Then I had a period during high school when I got to know several people from my high school class. We had some special years together a time when you started to be more adult than before. You started to try this by tasting alcohol and smoking and taking snuff, innocently, but still towards becoming an adult. We were a group of 10-15 people that hung out really closely. Many started studying down in Umeå after high school, so I've been down to Umeå a lot and visited. I don't know how many times I've been to what's called Brännbollsyran. These could be remarkable parties. We made up a lot of things.